Hi, and welcome to this session titled In David's Shoes, Fighting Goliath, Ending the Cage Age in the EU with Olga Kikou. I'm Belle, and I'll be the MC for this session. So following Olga's presentation, we'll move on to the live Q&A where Olga will respond to your questions. You can submit all your questions through the swap card live discussion feature. And then after 45 minutes, we'll wrap up and bring the whole session to an end. But first, I would like to introduce our speaker for the session. So Olga Kikou is head of the EU Office of Compassion in World Farming, an international organization dedicated to improving farm animal welfare, ending industrial animal agriculture, and achieving sustainable food and farming. Born and raised in Athens, Olga lived in the US for a number of years where she became involved in animal advocacy. She received her PhD from the University of Massachusetts and worked in international organizations in the nonprofit sector and in research and planning. Having managed the volunteer program for the Athens 2004 Olympic and Paralympic Games, she became involved in raising awareness on the importance of citizen participation. Olga is involved in advocacy work at EU level on key interests concerning the interlinked areas of animal welfare, food and farming, and raising the profile of these issues on the policy sphere. She also engages with civil society organizations and other stakeholders, exploring synergies and developing joint strategies to influence decision-making processes in all these areas. Olga is also the substitute representative of the Citizens Committee for the End of the Cage Age European Citizens Initiative. On to you, Olga.
Thank you so much, and I'm really glad to be here today. I'll just present the main issue today, and then I'll be glad to take questions. So we're going through some difficult times in the EU right now because of some backtracking from the European institutions, but we will persevere. So the EU is the EU's role in animal welfare has been applauded by many, and the EU is considered to be a global leader in animal welfare. However, is this really the case? The EU is certainly very involved in the trade of animal products, in the trade of live animals, and imports and exports a really huge amount of animal products across the world. At the same time, in the EU, we see that about 9 billion land animals are slaughtered every year, and over 1.2 billion aquatic farmed animals. So any progress that will take place in Europe actually has consequences and repercussions, and hopefully in the future positive impact globally. The EU has the animal welfare legislation in the EU consists of a number of directives and regulations. It is considered the most advanced in the world. However, this is the case because the rest of the world, at least most other countries, have little to none in terms of real laws to protect animals. The first act in the EU was adopted in the 1970s, and it focused on the slaughter of animals. Now we have, in the year 2023, we have a number of directives and regulations. The directives concern animals, and this is just for farmed animals. They focus on animals kept for farming purposes, and then they have some species-specific directives, on laying hens, pigs, calves, and chickens kept for meat production. At the same time, there are two regulations, one on transport and another one on slaughter. And the EU also recognizes animals as sentient beings, and this is part of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, And this is back from the so-called Lisbon Treaty back from 2009. So in the EU, animals are sentient beings. However, there's also another paragraph that talks about the exceptions there in regards to religion and culture and traditions. So one questions to what extent actually we really consider animals sentient beings if there are so many exceptions. The legislative process in the EU is as follows. We have a triangle, three main institutions, one that proposes legislation, that is the European Commission, and two others, the European Parliament and the Council of Agri-Fish Ministers, ministers from all 27 member states in the EU that actually vote on legislation, so they decide. And then we also have two other institutions, the Committee of the Regions and the European Economic and Social Committee, that are have a consultative role. They can issue opinions, but they don't have the right to issue to vote on legislation. Back in 2020, shortly after, just a few months after the current European Commission took office, they announced a plan to revise the animal welfare legislation that was in a bigger strategy called the Farm to Fork strategy that was about agriculture and food. And of course, we were elated back then because of the prospects of revising the entire acquis, given that this does not happen often. And certainly never before did we have such a comprehensive revision of the animal welfare legislation. So for this purpose, the European Commission actually announced a number of actions that they were taking. They gave mandates to the European Food Safety Authority to prepare scientific opinions on the welfare of several species. This is a EFSA, as it's called. This is the scientific, let's say, body of the EU. And usually before proposing legislation, the Commission always asks EFSA to produce scientific opinions. Also, the Commission ran a public consultation. There were close to 60,000 contributions from the public and stakeholders. There were also separate consultations with all the stakeholders, including the industry. And the Commission also evaluated the current legislation, and this was done via a so-called fitness check, and concluded that it is not fit for purpose and should be updated. Again, the scientific opinions from the European Food Safety Authority concerned a number of species: rabbits, pigs, laying hens, chickens kept for meat, calves, ducks, geese, and quail. There was a focus on the use of cages, whether animals should be kept in cages or not. The EFSA opinions actually concluded that the EU, that the welfare of animals is highly compromised in cages, and the EU should be moving away from cages for reasons of animal welfare. And of course, there were other recommendations regarding farmed animals. So the Commission proceeded with working on proposals on replacing the existing legislation on transport and slaughter, so producing new regulations, also replacing the existing directive and turning this into a regulation. This is for animals kept for commercial purposes, so animals on farm, including, among others. And also, the Commission had announced that they would also work on animal welfare labeling. early on, actually, before even the current commission, I just want to say a few words about the European Citizens Initiative and what is this instrument. The European Union also has in place a very important tool for citizen participation to enhance participation by citizens. It's called the European Citizens Initiative. And this was launched. It is actually it is mentioned in the treaty from 2009. And it was launched officially in 2012. There have been, the rules are that there should be the 7 citizens from 7 member states can collect signatures from across the EU. And if the signatures go over the 1 million mark, this is validated signatures. The signatures need to be validated by the member states. Then the European Commission is obligated to formally examine the ECI and issue its decision. It does not have to accept what the citizens want. So the citizens can ask a number of can have a number of asks on issues where the Commission can legislate, where the EU can legislate, because there are other issues where which are more of the which are in the competencies of the member states and not the EU. And there have been over 100 ECIs so far, but only one has received a clear positive commitment from the EU, from the European Commission. And this is the EAGxECI, which calls on the Commission to produce legislation that ends the use of cages in animal farming in the EU. So it is the one and only initiative so far that has received this positive commitment. This actually happened in June of 2021, the positive commitment. And right before that, a few days before that, before the decision from the commitment, the European Parliament voted on a resolution which actually accepted the phase out of cages for farmed animals in the EU. And then a few days later, the European Commission, and here was you have the European Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, Stella Kyriakides. They announced that the Commission was going to propose a ban for all species named in the ECI. So we were elated back then, but also that's when the attacks started coming from the opposition. Of course, there was opposition before that, but that's when let's say the other side woke up and employed their weapons to make sure that this does not happen or it's delayed as much as possible. So following, we had soon after that, we had a number of things that happened. We had the COVID, of course, the COVID pandemic, which was quite in full force back then. And also we had the Ukraine war that has been used by the industry to attack many of the files that were going to be revised, not just animal welfare, but also environmental files and others, for reasons of food security. We also saw that many files from the so-called European Green Deal, and that was a bigger strategy that in a way included this farm to fork strategy and the animal welfare revision. That was the Green Deal was to improve the environmental performance of the EU and halt the environmental destruction caused by a number of reasons, including agriculture. And some of these files have been watered down. Some of them have been postponed. And the animal welfare legislation in the last few months, we saw that there was a turnaround actually, and we saw a backlash in terms of the the Commission's response to these proposals. So there were, of course, vested interests that tried their best to make sure that there would be delays here. And we saw that in October, for example, just last month, the proposals were not included in the Commission's program. And the only so far out of the 4 files that were supposed to be presented, actually they would have been presented by the end of September of this year. They were not, and what we are expecting now is only the transport regulation, the new transport proposal, and the Commission has been silent on the other much expected regulation that would also bring an end to cage farming. So the big agri lobby that spends millions of euros in Brussels, just in Brussels each year, with Copa Cogeca, this is the group of European farmers, and a group that is, let's say, receives preferential treatment and is ever present. Has voiced their position and has raised objections regarding the animal welfare revision, although they do claim that they support animal welfare. However, we have seen that it's actually the opposite. They published in the summer. They published impact assessments on specifically on the transition to cage-free farming, presenting a very negative, let's say, picture, using certain scientific arguments, for which, of course, we have reasons to object. They also tried to delay this process for as long as possible, calling for long transition periods, actually, in some cases, even up to 30 years. And in general, they have been attacking us in a number of ways. We are those calling for higher animal welfare standards, talking about the end of cages, but also other practices, harmful practices for animals. We are characterized as emotional, and of course they use many other names. This continues. They by the big what we call big agri is not just let's say the farmers unions as farmer associations, but also many other sectors, including the feed sector, breeders, the traders, those who trade animals, those who transport them, etc. So you can see here some of them. This is directly opposite to what is actually how citizens actually feel and how they think about what the future of animal protection in the EU should be. Just last month, the European Commission, after a lot of push from us, published the results of an official poll in the EU called Eurobarometer poll. It takes place every few years on many different issues, and it's an official poll where citizens from all member states, all 27 member states, are asked about their opinions. We saw that this Eurobarometer poll, the last one, the most recent one, was back from 2015, 2016. This one now shows an even higher support for animal welfare across the EU, across all member states. There were questions directed at the public regarding a number of issues around farmed animals, and the overwhelming majority of Europeans believe that the welfare of farmed animals should be better protected, both at EU level and also at member state level. Close to almost 90%, 9 out of 10 Europeans believe that animals should not be kept in individual cases, and over half of them, 60%, are actually willing to pay more for products that come from higher welfare systems. Also, specifically in cages, here you can see the level of support across the EU, where basically it ranges from 80% in countries such as Bulgaria, Latvia, and Romania to 95% in Cyprus, Greece, Luxembourg, and Slovenia. So this is a really, really high number of citizens. The vast majority of citizens actually want animals out of cages. Currently, the situation in the EU is we are living in difficult times. We have seen the rise of far-right parties and anti-EU trends across the region. We have also seen populist messaging, Trump-style politics, fake news, of course. And also in regards to animal welfare, we have seen that there's a shift, especially because of the upcoming elections next year, to groups that actually support, cater to farmers for their own reasons, of course. And what are we doing now? Well, we are going through a period of reflection. Of course, as mentioned before, we were elated when all these plans were presented. However, we are looking ahead, and maybe we're in a difficult period right now. We're undergoing a difficult period because of the upcoming elections in June of 24. But we will persevere, so we're not giving up. Actually, we are intensifying our efforts now. So we are considering, in regards to the End the Cage Age European Citizens Initiative, we are considering next steps, including even legal measures. We want to keep animal welfare in the agenda of politicians, really, really high in this agenda. We will be working also at member state level, gathering support from countries that have already have been close to us and have been supportive. We are also focusing on the EU elections in June of 24 to make sure that citizens, voters understand that politicians ought to keep those who make pledges to support animal welfare, and there are many, that they keep their word. So we will be working with the next parliament when this is in place after June of 24, and also with the new European Commission, which is expected to be appointed in November of 24. Therefore, we will be working on all these legislative files and working with the new commission and make sure that we achieve the best results for animals. So we will not give up. hopefully, I mean, we do see the light at the end of the tunnel. We feel that we've been through a difficult period right now, but of course, things are turning around, and we will stick with this and make sure that we bring the best results for animals as best as possible. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to just stop. Yes, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Olga, for taking us through the recent challenges and, hopefully positive direction moving forward in the cage-free movement. We do have quite a few questions submitted already, so let's start out with the top voted one, but please keep them coming. So we have a question from Excel, who asks, we know some conventional battery cages have been sold and exported to African producers by EU producers following the entry into force of the 1999 Egg-Laying Hens Directive in 2012. So, is CIWF or any other NGO trying to prevent this sort of second-order consequence as part of the campaign to ban all types of cage farming? And if so, how could we possibly do that?
Yes, this happened actually back at the end of the 1990s. The European Union voted on a future ban of the battery cages, the kind of the most cruel of all cages. They voted on this ban, and this came into force in 2012, so quite a few years later. We knew that there were certain manufacturers who just shifted production outside the EU and started selling these outside the EU. Of course, we are very much against this. We will try to prevent this. We have learned, in a way, our lesson from last time around. So when the expected ban on all cages in the EU takes place, we will try, of course, to make sure that the manufacturing of cages stops in the EU and is not transferred somewhere else. But the issue itself also concerns other areas it's not just animal welfare and the relevant commission services. It has to do with manufacture of equipment, etc. It has to do with trade, and there are many other sectors involved here, not just the Directorate General that oversees animal welfare.
Got it. All right. We do also have another question from Sam. So this is relating to your lobbying goals. So Sam asks, do you have any thoughts on the effects of bird flu on your lobbying goals? And does it come up often as an objection?
Yes. Bird flu comes very often because it doesn't go away, and it's directly related, of course, to the keeping of high numbers of animals in such intensive farming. And we have been working. First of all, to reduce numbers of animals kept in farms. We also, I think, as long as there is intensive farming, this will continue. Not just the avian flu, but also other pandemics. Unfortunately. So that's why we are trying to end factory farming as soon as possible. But also a lot also depends on food policies in the EU, not just on farming policies. We want to significantly reduce the consumption of animals and animal products across the EU. And we hope that this will also have a positive impact elsewhere, not just in this region.
Awesome. We also do have another question on the topic of citizen participation. So Ruben asked, what can European citizens do to help in this ending the cage-free movement?
Okay, well, best thing to do is speak out, mobilize, try to join the movement, join organizations, or act as on an individual basis. So work collectively and also individually to make sure that policymakers get the message that they cannot ignore this issue and they cannot delay the inevitable. I would say that citizens can work at member state level if they are in the EU, for example, but also any, and of course EU level, but targeting policymakers, those who make decisions. However, any action outside the EU also has an effect. We are, because of globalization, we all live in the world today, and we learn the news from other countries and other regions as soon as they happen. As soon as something happens, we become aware of it. Therefore, I believe that there's a great opportunity for influencing here. Any progress that takes place in any region of the world can have positive consequences elsewhere.
Awesome. I think that's pretty positive to hear how we can also be a part of it. We do have a question from Ilya, who asked, what do you think is the chance that in 2024, the European Commission would suggest a ban on cages? Because for now, Ursula von der Leyen kept silent. And relating to it, how do you think animal rights organizations from countries in the EU could support this work against cages most efficiently during this period of time?
Mm-hmm. Well, because of the elections, realistically, because of the elections that we elect a new European Parliament in June of 24. Therefore, soon after the beginning of the year, and already actually some of it has begun, the MEPs, the members of the European Parliament, the current members, but also other candidates will start campaigning if they haven't done so already. So in general, 2024 is an election year. First, we have a new European Parliament that will be elected in June, but then we also have the Commission is coming to an end, that its term is coming to an end. So from the summer on, we will have nominees for commissioners. The member states, each member state nominates one person to be a commissioner. Therefore, we will have this process too. So a new commission will be in place in November. So the chances of actually passing or proposing laws or even preparing laws are very small for 2024. But what we will do is we are preparing to make sure that the cage ban is a priority for the Parliament and for the new Commission. So this is where we are focusing our efforts now. And of course, the animal rights movement, again, as is the case with citizens, anybody who is a member of any group can try to target policymakers, decision makers, but also make people aware, make other citizens aware of the need to protect animals, the need to support higher animal welfare standards.
Great. We do have another question from Jennifer about lobbying. So she asked, how are these lobbies able to have such an influence over the European Commission? And when you say that they spend millions on lobbying, is this on media efforts directed at the public? And how would this directly affect the decisions of EU members of Parliament?
Yeah, there's a big difference here between us and them. they have economic interests to maintain the status quo, to keep this going as long as possible. I think they know very well that this is coming to an end. I mean, anybody who can see the future, at least in the next few years, they see that things are changing. The status of animals in our society is changing. We don't see it, we don't feel it so much because unfortunately farmed animals are considered food animals, are used by humans for food. However, we all know that this is going to be short-lived. It's not going to last for long. So these groups are trying as much as possible via legislation, via their connections to those in power, to maintain the status quo and keep it going for as long as possible. So this is the big difference. The big difference is that they have an economic interest. They are well vested. Let's say these are vested interests. Whereas those of us working in this field are working because we want we hold other values for the EU, for our society. We don't want to see other non-human animals to be exploited by humans. So this is so that's why they have. I mean, we are doing this because of our beliefs. They're doing this because of the money. I mean, this is the difference.
Thanks, Olga. And at this point, I just wanted to check in and say we have about a few minutes left in the Q&A, so I'll maybe take a couple more questions. If there's any other questions, please enter it in the questions section. We do have one from Adam. So he says, considering such a high anti-cage sentiment, is there a market opportunity for progressive farmers to satisfy demand for humanely raised animal products, thus reducing overall animal suffering and maybe even for increased standards beyond just no cages?
Yes, I think there is a market. The problem is that the way the system works right now is basically it does not present many incentives for farmers to change their farming systems because they keep getting subsidies. We have the Common Agricultural Policy in the EU, which is a policy that uses basically 1/3 of the EU budget, and it goes to agriculture. And there are many subsidies to keep this system going. We have subsidies not only for farming, but even for the promotion of agricultural products, including animal products. So when we see what we have seen many times in the EU is that when consumption goes for a certain product, let's say for lamb meat, goes down, everybody's up in arms and they go to the EU institutions and they ask for funds for marketing, for uses in marketing promotional policies to make sure that they advertise about the so-called good meat that they want to sell, and they basically try to bring consumption levels back up again. And we have seen this with all animal products. So in a way, that's why we are actually focusing very much on the policymakers and targeting the policymakers, because this system needs to change. So in short, yes, there are farmers who want to do better, but unfortunately, the way the system works is that alternatives are, switching, let's say, even away from animal production to production of farming, for example, for other plant-based foods, it's not so easy to do because there aren't many incentives for them to do that.
Thanks, Olga. I think that was quite helpful. And on that topic, I think we'll take one last question on this. So Annabelle asks, in terms of reducing the consumption of meat, does your organization cooperate in any way with other organizations like long-termism or alternative proteins who focus on products like plant-based meat, for example?
Yes, we very much do so. And we work, and I can say in Brussels, for example, at EU level, we work with many other organizations, including the European Vegetarian Union, ProVeg, GFI, many other organizations that actually have this goal. And we are also part of coalitions such as the Food Policy Coalition, which is a coalition of not just animal welfare groups, but also environmental groups, consumer groups, and others that are looking for a real reform in our agriculture and food system. So yes, we very much work on this. We focus on farm animal welfare, but also food and farming, and making sure that the future ahead is very different and is much kinder to animals, but also we change our eating habits, and this is also reflected in policies that encourage us to do that.
That's great to hear. I think we will conclude the session. I see that there's a couple more questions, but you can always feel free to reach out to Olga directly. And I think she's having office hours as well right after the session, so you can redirect the questions there. Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks Olga for sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.